Today I'm out and about shooting with the Tamron 16-30 f2.8 Z mount full frame lens. No Con, unfortunately, because he's on holiday, but I'm gonna give this a whirl by myself. There's people coming. Let's talk about this lens a little bit. So the most logical comparison in the Nikon range are the Nikon 14-30, which is an f4 lens, but is one of their Pro line S lenses. And then you've also got the 17-28 f2.8, which is what we kind of tongue-in-cheek call a Tamron. It's a design made by Tamron but was then brought out by Nikon and is an official Nikon lens. The Tamron 16-30 f2.8 is a genuine Tamron lens. It has all the things that we expect, has the USB port to update the firmware built into the lens, and overall it's a much lighter and I would say slightly less robust feel than the genuine Nikon or Nikon own brand lenses. Saying that, the reputation that it has for optics is particularly good, and because they've released it in other mounts, we have seen earlier versions of it. This is the Generation 2. We haven't seen a Nikon version of this, but we have seen it in other mounts. This one has the quieter, newer VXD motor in it, which essentially means that it's just very, very fast for focusing and should be compatible with all of your Nikon super fast face recognition, animal recognition, bird recognition, etc. Saying that, it's a wide angle, so we're not actually using it for wildlife photography. The closest focusing distance on this lens is 19 centimeters, so we're going to do the old Becky in the field test and focus really closely. Oh wow, that's actually really good. So at f2.8, obviously it's not a macro lens. The reproduction ratio is about 1:6. So it's definitely not going to ever be used as a macro, but the fact that you can get this close, I'm still going, yeah, about there. Camera says no, but about there works really nicely. And because it's f2.8, you can also get a really nice shallow depth of field with it. It is wide angle, so it's not going to give you this lovely macro effect, but we'll go through the shots a little bit later and you'll be able to see what they look like. So sometimes the focus doesn't quite hit it and then you have to just grab that manual focus ring. I am using it for a purpose you're not supposed to be using a wide angle lens for, so we'll forgive it for that. When you're at the very closest focusing distance, it does try and focus further away because it thinks it's supposed to be further away. So the nice thing is that this is a manual focus ring. I can just grab it, refocus on the fly, and it's absolutely no problem. Nice thing about this lens is it takes 67mm filters, so that's quite a common size for most Tamron lenses and a lot of Nikon lenses as well. So if you have a neutral density filter set in that size or even bigger and you can use step down rings, then you could use it for some long exposures on a tripod for sure. It's interesting, you do get a bit of blue fringing when you're shooting wide open at f2.8, and I've also noticed you get quite a lot of vignette at f2.8 as well. Seems to sort itself out by about f5.6 at the widest end. At the 30mm end, you don't get too much vignetting, a little bit again wide open. By f4, it's pretty much gone. The center of the frame is very sharp. I did some brick wall tests, which I will look at even closer a little bit later, but I noticed that at the wider apertures, the corners do lose sharpness mostly, and at the 16mm end, you've got some distortion, but we'll go back to the lab. We'll go back to the office and take a look at those in a bit. Now that I've had some time to have a look at the images, let's just talk through the basic image quality of the 16-30. So first of all, straight out of the camera, the images do need some correction. You get some of that pincushion distortion when you're shooting wide open at 16mm. To be honest, comparing the shots that I took with this lens versus shots that I've taken with the 17-28 and the 14-30, they all do suffer from that quite a bit at the widest end. So I wasn't particularly surprised by that. There is some fall off in sharpness in the corners, even at f8, which I wasn't expecting. You'll see from the brick wall shots that overall sharpness is really, really good, but there is a little bit of loss of quality in those very outer edges, even when stopping down. Vignette is mostly noticeable wide open, which was what I essentially saw while I was out and about shooting, but it does sort of handle itself by, again, 5.6 f8, so that's pretty good. One thing I would say that's curious about this lens is it is exactly the same weight as the Nikon or Tamron 17-28 f2.8. They're both 450 grams on the Nikon Z mount. The Tamron comes out in a Sony mount and a Nikon mount. The Sony is a little bit lighter, funnily enough, but they're identical weight. There's about 300 pounds difference in terms of price. The 14-30 f4, whilst being one of Nikon's S-line lenses, is only about £100 more expensive than the 17-28, while being an f4, not a 2.8. It has those S-line optics though, so it's an extra 35 grams. You're looking at 485 grams for the 14-30. So although the lens itself is shorter and stockier than both the 17-28 and the 16-30, it weighs a little bit more, and as I said, it has that S-line extra pizzazz that Nikon throw in. Straight out of the camera, this lens produces really nice punchy images. I just enhanced mine a little bit, just evening out the shadows and the light, because it was quite a flat day and I needed a bit more contrast. But overall, I was really, really impressed with the overall quality, image quality coming straight from the camera. There is some blue fringing which I noticed, particularly around the trees and any high contrast subject against a background. With or without, I took off lens corrections altogether just so that you could see what the images look like without any lens corrections. It can be handled in post, but it is interesting to see how noticeable that is. Even when you're shooting at f4 or 5.6, you do get that, whether you're at the 16 end or the 30 end. So who is this lens for? I would say if you do anything from landscape to some food photography, if you're doing astrophotography, it's got that nice wide aperture, which is really, really lovely. If you are doing street photography, it's super versatile because it covers both ends of the spectrum between 16 to 30. I found myself mostly shooting at one extreme or the other of the lens rather than the middle ranges, which is funny because generally I shoot with a 28mm, so I guess 28-30 is kind of where I wanted to be most of the time. But I would say that it's a really good and versatile lens. It's lightweight, it doesn't feel as sturdy, as I said, as the Nikon lenses. However, you do get a cheaper price point at about £849 retail here in the UK. So if you're trying to save an extra few pennies, I don't think you'll see a vast difference between the Tamron and the Nikon 17-28 f2.8. There are some small differences in optics, closest focusing distance, things like that, but ultimately both are super usable. So if you ask me, I do like this lens. I think that the addition of the ability to update the firmware in the side of these lenses, as they all have, is really, really good. I like the fact that it's very well balanced on the ZF, which is my camera. I think that it would probably be well balanced on a Z6 III as well as a Z5 or Z5 Mark II. So if you have any of those bodies, then you'll have no problem with balancing this on your camera. It's not an overly heavy lens and it fits well in the kit bag. So if you're combining it with, let's say, a 24-70 or 28-75, 2.8, something like that, then you'll have a 2.8 range all the way through from 16 to whatever your longest end you want it to be. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review video, and if you'd like to let me know your thoughts on the 16-30, or if you've got the 17-28 or the 14-30, drop them in the comments below. And thank you to my husband for being my cameraman for this video.